Hello. So this is going to be a compilation of a lot of footage that I took while I repaired this heater box in my Rover P6B. I've tried to put it together as a series from start to finish. I didn't really take much footage or photos of this coming out of the car or what it looked like before I took it out, as in when it was still in situ, which I now regret. But I'll cover all of that at the end, along with some other helpful tips I think that might help anyone out there who needs to rebuild or even replace their entire heater unit in their P6B, or P6 I should say. Right towards the end, I actually went back to the workshop manual and I had a bit of a deep dive into some threads online and some posts on Facebook. You'll hear me refer to this as the fresh air flap door and things like that. That's not really the right name for it. From memory, it's called the main air vent, I think. And you'll also see that I get the names wrong of certain parts and I kind of interpret things incorrectly about what this is for and things like that. So I've tried to cover everything off at the end from start to finish with my suggestions about ways that you might want to go about things, mistakes that I made, and essentially how to take this out of the car and then put it back into the car once you have finished rebuilding it. Or like I said, if you've got a second-hand one that you are replacing your leaking one with. And you can see there, that's the culprit of why this ended up coming out of the car. So it's quite long. I think I've just had a quick look at the total length and it goes for over an hour. If you don't want to sit and listen to my ramblings for over an hour, skip to the end. I think it's about the last 15 minutes or so, and I go through basically top 3, top 5 things to look out for. And now that I've done this will sit aside for one moment and I will get on to the engine bay and starting to line up the next engine that's going to go into the car, along with the replacement transmission and some other things that need to be updated and replaced as well. If you've got any questions about something that I didn't cover in enough detail, or maybe I left out entirely, or even if you have a suggestion for something that I covered that I went off the beaten path or got it really wrong, drop it down into comments below as well. The idea is that this helps people out there who are thinking of working on one of these, or they've got an entire unit that needs to be replaced. And I figure the more knowledge that's out there on YouTube, the easier it is for people coming behind you, and you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Enjoy. Here we have the original P6B Series 2 late heater box, which you can see here. It's a Smith's unit. And it has this indentation here, which I'm assuming this one, thank you Fraser, is a Series 1 Smith's heater box, also out of a P6B, which doesn't have this indentation here. And knowing my luck, if I take this and attempt to put it into my car, it won't fit. Probably because there's something, I'm guessing probably power steering related that's there, or even it'll be something like windscreen wiper motor mechanism, I think. So I have, in my sheer brilliance, taken this rod here, which sits inside the cabin to the left of the driver, and you can see that it's actually been extended here, probably at the New Zealand plant, Nelson, when these cars were assembled there, to take into account the air conditioning unit that was put in, that would have sat, it's probably about here, and this rod, I think, yeah, it's just a bolt with a piece of steel on there. Me playing around with it on the bench, you know, clearing out, what's it been, 40, nearly 50 years worth of crud. And I have, we go right in here, successfully managed to, it's a spline fit in here to this, whatever this part is, aluminium, pot metal, something. So now when I rotate this, it's just spinning inside here. And if you come over here, English engineering in all of its brilliance, this bit here travels up here, this pulls down, this goes in here, witchcraft happens, and then it opens a flapper door here. This actually sits in front of the windscreen, front of the car, windscreen sits here, and this is your fresh air going into the cabin. So what I'm going to do now is take this apart, give it a clean, replace a lot of the foam seals inside that have fallen to pieces. I will also try and salvage some bits and pieces from this one here. Unfortunately, this one had all of the nice anodized, I'm thinking it's anodized, finish on the rods. This one here is looking very, very second-hand. So if I can try and use this one and at least give it some kind of tidy up. I've had anodized parts done before for cars. The only problem is I think the place that did it was on the other side of the city, and they were only open Monday to Friday and all this other kind of drama. So if I can avoid that, that would be great. I mean, no one's ever going to say it. It's under the dash. I would still like it to look nice though. All right, into it. We'll see how we go. So, have gotten this far, and on the splines, if I rotate it through, you can actually see that some of them are damaged and some are actually twisted. And if we look in here, now it's a snug fit, but it was sitting like this, which I think is why the splines had twisted on this piece here. So if we have a look through here, can barely make it out, but it's interesting because the splines don't run all the way to the edge of the part. Yeah, there we go. You can see it's just rounded off in there. So I saw somewhere that someone had tapped the end and put a nut on there. I was thinking just a bit of Loctite or even just a gudgeon pin or something like that through there. On here, what I'm trying to do is basically take everything out of here, take out the blower motor that's in here, to get into here as well, because I noticed that this was a bit corroded down the bottom here. I'll wait until it's sunnier outside and take a better shot. Also too, so this part here, you can see on the flapper door, it's actually got silicone stuck on. Now on the back of this, the foam is degraded, and in this car, even with this flapper door closed, this goes down onto your feet across the transmission tunnel. Even on a, this would be closed, I'd have the heater turned off, no fan going, heat would just come billowing out across your feet. So in summer, the car was almost undrivable, just because of the amount of heat that was coming through here, through the, you can just see it in there, the heater matrix in there. And I suspect that's also leaking. So all of this has got to be replaced, but it was interesting to, on the car as well, you can see they've just slathered this elastic on to try and make it a tight fit, and they've managed to also glue the flapper door onto it. So I'm not sure what was there, whether there was foam there and that's disintegrated over time or whatever. Also too, these hoses have disintegrated. All the heater hoses were pretty much the original ones, I think. There's some overflow hoses here on the side. One of those long gone. I think that fell off a couple of years ago. This one here as well was just hanging on for dear life. These go in here like that. And in there, that's also a rubber hose, I believe. I saw someone that 3D printed some replacements. I've only played with a 3D printer a little bit. So if I can find that file, or reach out to that person again if I can find them and get that printed, or even just ask one of my old work colleagues or a friend, that would be excellent. Because for Rover P6s, most of the parts you can buy, it's every now and then there are some suspension parts, or there are just random rubbers that no one seems to make. If you look up the part for a P6, different websites will say, you know, no longer available, or, you know, it's crazy expensive by the time you ship it out to Australia from England. But if you look up just that part without referencing Rover P6, it'll come up under something like a Land Rover or a Range Rover, and there's some good suppliers here in Australia, so we're quite lucky in that regards. But overall, Rover P6s and P6Bs are pretty great in terms of part support, just because of how many they made for how long, and just how many fans there are that keep them going and on the road. One thing though, I've been taking the screws out of here just as I'm going along slowly. I'm recording where things are going, and then I've just here and in a couple other places. Where are they? Oh yeah, just on the sides here. Again, English cars, English engineering. Part of the heater box is held together by small Phillips head screws, this small, and part of it is held together with pop rivets. And the consensus seems to be there's no rhyme or reason to where there's a screw or a pop rivet. So most of the heater box this side is held together with screws. Most of it on this side is held together with pop rivets. Who knows? The heater matrix is apart. Foam is on its way for the flapper doors. I have taken the heater matrix core to a friend to get recored, or worst case scenario, I'll use the core from this after I get it tested and transfer it across. But it looks like that core can be replaced and the end tanks reused. Unfortunately, the radiator, and there's a reason why this is here, I didn't know that it was leaking until I took the actual radiator out of the car. The car has always had a slight coolant loss, which I always thought was the overflow of coolant coming out, and because there was no catch can, overflow bottle, whatever you want to call it, that it was always losing a bit of coolant every time I used the car. It turns out I was probably losing some coolant out of the heater matrix core, and the radiator had a slight weeping leak. Dropped the radiator off at the same time, and the two end tanks are no good. So it looks like I will need a new radiator from scratch. I do have a spare radiator. If that can't be used, then it's on to plan C or D or even X. Here's my amazing paint booth that I've put together out of a beer carton. And I've taken a couple of photos as well as a reference on where certain brackets and things go, and had to plug up the holes so I don't get paint going through and attaching itself onto the foam and things like that. So after I sprayed the side here, which is the outside part, I just flipped it over and I've just given in here a couple of quick coats of paint just to cover up some areas that didn't get good coverage when I had it sitting the other way, inverted inside my portable spray booth here. Also just going to touch up some of the foam along here. It's just hanging over the flap door, so the last thing I want is to put this all back together and then find out that the flap doors don't close all the way, because that was part of one of the problems. So these are the screws for the heater box. The heater box was put together with a mixture of these screws, which I think I've already discussed, but anyway, and pop rivets. And what I'm going to do is use spare screws off my spare heater box to put my heater box back together, because I know that if I pop rivet it back together, I'll have to take the thing apart. So that's just my luck. What I've done is, because I couldn't find replacement screws, I think these are Posi-Drive or they're a Imperial thread or something like that. Anyway, I just could not find them. I have put a magnet bar under a piece of cardboard. I put the screws thread way up. I gave them a couple of coats of primer. Then I gave them a couple of coats of black. Then what I will do is take away the magnet bar, push the screws threads down through the cardboard, give them one more, or probably a couple of coats of colour. I'll assemble the heater box and then mask off everything that's not black, and then just give it one final fog coat. And here's some over here that I used as my test subjects. The only problem with doing it this way is there's a couple of different screw sizes mixed in here. I think I know where things go, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. We're not going for a street machine of the year. That's my motto. Also, if anyone has a better idea or a better way of painting screws to get a nice even coverage on the thread and the head, shout out, because I'd love to know, because this kind of drove me crazy. 30,000 degrees in Australian summer is probably not the right temperature to lay on some paint, but I've almost got these bits done. I've just painted some other bits and bobs for the engine bay as well, like some brackets and some things like that I had sanded back and primed and things like that off camera. I've got the heater box over here as well, which I've masked off the areas that I've already painted and bits where I didn't want paint getting in. Put primer and a couple of coats of black on here already. And then, fingers crossed, this should all be ready to go back together after I've put a few more coats, probably 1 or 2 coats on. I found it a bit hard to get in here while painting this bit, so I will come back and just touch up a couple parts along here. This is the bit that will see all the weather because it's the fresh air vent. So if anything else, I just wanted to make this bit look nice and everything else rust proof, and it's been such a saga slash corporate buzzword journey to get it to this state. But I'm close, I'm nearly there, and once I've done this, then I can move on to the more interesting stuff. So, contrary to the Haynes and Gregory's books of lies that reassembly is the reverse of disassembly, I have got my new heater core here, which goes in between 2 mounting tabs. And what I've done is, since this heater core is a little bit smaller than the old one, just the bases are slightly smaller, as in, sorry, not bases, the tanks, end tanks. So this part and this part here that's covered in the foam. What I've done is I have made my own little grabby tool thingy, soft whatever, and I've just bent these tabs in and I've put foam on the end of this pair of pliers here just so I don't rip all the fresh paint off. And what I'll do is I'll just pad out the sides along the heater matrix here, the heater core, with some of the foam that I got, which will work out well. So that will be nice and squished in. I'll put some foam along here, some foam along there, and then on the top here, done the same. So I've bent this tab in and this tab in with the pliers, and then I've just noticed that, or I think I noticed it the other day, and I pushed them back on and I thought they were fine, but I think the glue isn't that great on this foam. So I went to grab some hobby glue and someone forgot to put the lid on, so it's completely dried out. So I'll go and grab some more, and it's just that typical hobby glue that sticks everything, including your fingers, together. I'll just run a little bead around the outside, and then that foam won't come off. Because I imagine the inside of all of this gets quite hot. Well, I know it did. It got really hot with the engine coolant flowing through the small radiator slash heater matrix slash heater core. And the last thing I want is the glue on this, basically, or sorry, the adhesive backing on this giving way after a bit, and all the foam falling off and blocking the flaps from operating. And just for context as well, so this was the base of the old heater core slash matrix, and it is actually quite bigger than the replacement, so I can see why they included this when I bought a new core. I'll put the details of this company below. Great to deal with. Ordered it, got a reply email saying yep, no problems, and I think I had it at my house from Britain to Australia in something like a week. Great, couldn't ask for better service than that. So I will pop this in and pat it out with some foam, glue, reassemble, give everything a final coat, and then I've got to muck about with this a little bit just to get the lid under this edge. Sorry, this whatever you want to call it, lever assembly, I guess, to get it to sit under here while these are all sort of sliding into their positions in here. Do that, give everything a final coat, and then I've got some 3D printed parts to put in here as well for the elbow drains. Gotta go and buy some new coolant hoses slash heater lines, whatever you want to call it. Actually, I forgot, I've got to put this on as well, because I tried to find a replacement piece of oilcloth. This sits on the weather facing side, so this side here. Could not find it. Went to a couple of stores around Melbourne, close to me. Everyone just gave me a blank look, and every time I looked for it online, it kept getting pointed towards really wild print tablecloths. So I'm just going to try and use some dubbin, which I use for motorcycle leathers, to try and bring this back to life, and then I can stick this back on. I mean, I'll see how it goes. It might work, it might not, but that's the best I can do. I think that's about it. Onwards and upwards. Here's where I'm up to. So I'm just putting the end of the heater box back in with all the flap doors and everything you see in here. I tried to put the original piece of oilskin cloth on this main flap over here, which is the flap door for the fresh air vent, but I actually found that the material had shrunk over time and it didn't cover all of the foam, so I thought it was kind of pointless. So I will keep trying to find some proper cloth to go there, or just keep the trapdoor closed when it's raining outside, but I suspect that this foam will degrade over time like the original foam. Anyway, I'm going to just take it slowly but surely and slot these trap slash flap doors back into their slots back down in the main heater box case and test fit to see that everything still works. And this is why you just slowly but surely take your time because I was going, what's going on here? Why isn't this going back the way it should? It's a bit more awkward than I remember, because taking it apart was difficult, and I did take a lot of footage and some photos and things like that, but I realized that I had this flap here rather than over here. And if you look down there, right down the bottom here, this is where the hole is for this guide pin. There's a pin just poking out down the bottom here, kind of the rod end, pin end, whatever you want to call it. That sits down here, not here. So that's why something like this, where it's been a few months, in this case it's been far too long since I took this all apart, just take your time, go back, check your photos, and yeah, if you've got reference material like I have here, great. But unfortunately in my case, they, as far as I know, never published any kind of workshop manual for this, which doesn't help. Take 3. Almost got it back together. Along here, I've scraped the KBS paint off because it was such a tight fit, trying to squeeze it in, because the foam is so thick. That's fine. When it all comes together, this door fits snugly in here, so I can treat this again, just mask it off and paint it properly. The only problem is I haven't got the pin, the locating pin in here, so I've got to faffer that with this, which means this has to move and then this rod has to bend, and etc, etc. And in doing so, I slipped and have sliced the top of my thumb open, which leads me to a point. If you work on old cars, motorcycles, whatever, that has old rusty metal around, go and get your tetanus shots. Go get your boosters as well. I think that's one thing that I was pretty adamant on doing ever since I started faffing about on cars and motorbikes. And now I don't have to worry about it every time I slice my finger open. So, finally got the heater box back together. Got the doors in their proper spots, levers all set up, ready to go, and you've got 2 doors here, so one of them, they actuate off each other, so when one opens the other one closes, etc. It was going great until I tried to close this door. Now this door here is the one for air going into the footwell, I believe, of the car. And I think I've said it before, but my car always, since I had it, always had a problem with hot air going onto your feet. And this was part of the reason why I took this whole thing apart. Anyway, went to close it. Doesn't close. Actually springs back. I have made a terrible error. The foam here is too thick. And what it's doing, it's hitting on the edge of the opening for the air to flow through. So what I did was I actually used measurements I took from all of the old foam that was on here before I ripped it all off, and then I made some paper templates, cut it all to size, and I thought I was being very clever putting thicker foam on there to stop heat coming from the heater matrix, which sits right here. So if get airflow through here and then it trapped all onto your feet, or into the cabin rather. And no, I have basically made a huge mistake. So it's late, I'm annoyed at myself, but I'm glad I found this before I put the car back together. I mean, you can even see here, the door doesn't actually sit flush. Springs back. And the one over here, which is the main one, won't even close because the foam is sitting sort of on the edge of the lip and stops it swinging shut. So I'm going to pull this end plate off that has the doors, take all the foam off, which is annoying because I just glued all the foam on the other day where it was a bit loose because the adhesive wasn't great. Take all that off. If I need to, I'll give it a quick sand back, quick spray of paint, and then I will use, I've just kicked the mosquito coils on the floor for the third time. I will use some thinner foam that I used for something else on my car, and I'll just use this instead. And I actually measured this against some of the old foam that came off the car, which is here. It's exactly the same type. I think it's about 4 or 5 mil, and hopefully that works. But yeah, what a disaster. I'm getting to the stage I'm getting so sick of talking about this stupid heater, but if I can make it work, it'll be such a triumph. And then the last bit will be to fix this broken part here, which has got the twisted rods. So I made a video about the heater core and all the problems I'd had, starting with using the wrong foam, which was too thick, so the heater box doors wouldn't seal shut properly. Then I tried again using a different type of foam, which was a lot thinner, and spent hours and hours cutting foam to different shapes. But surprisingly, this was actually really tricky to work with. It didn't want to hold a shape while I was cutting it. So I cut foam to different shapes, I test fitted it, played around with it, and it was just really finicky, probably because I'm trying to do it with things like a texter and a ruler and a pair of really sharp scissors, because I also found that a knife would kind of bunch the foam and then it would go out of shape and things like that. So I think in the end I'm just going to use this, and this is a neoprene material. It's what I used on some of the other heater box doors, which were the fresh air vents. I might make a start to finish video and take all of my, basically my short film pieces that I made and edit it all together in case someone says, oh, you know, we want to see a heater box restored from start to finish. I might do that. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is just today cut all the shapes out that I need to, stick them on because it's got the adhesive on the back, and then just put this thing together and paint the outside of it, and then it is done. Because when I took this foam all apart, all of this got stuck on the inside of where I'd already painted and things like that, so I had to strip it all, sand it back, etc. So I am further behind now than what I was about a month ago, but I think that this stuff will just do. And I mean, the car's not going to get driven in all weathers like it used to, so I think that this is going to be the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get this heater box done, so then I can move on to the more interesting stuff. I'm going to give this a go, cut all the shapes out, stick them on the doors, put the heater back together, and I'll shoot a quick shot of the new heater matrix going in as well, and then that should be it. Fingers crossed. So I've got my template here that I have used to size up what needs to go in here. Can't really see it. There we go. But so flap door, neoprene or foam will go here, closes here. What I'd had was I had the big thick foam on here, and when you went to close it, it sat open like this still. When I tried to put that slim foam on like this, again, it was so fiddly, and if I didn't get it right inside this bit here, Actually, I'll turn this light on and see if this works. Okay, so here we are. Piece of paper template. This is how the neoprene / foam will go on the door. So this door is the door that lets hot air from the heater core comes through 2 doors and then down onto your feet inside. If you have the foam slightly too thick, it sits outside of this opening, and you can see here where I had the original grey foam. This is all the remnants of the original factory foam as well. So had the thick grey foam on here, and when you close the door, it actually sat ajar a little bit, and you would just get would have exactly the same problem: hot air coming out, dumping onto your feet. I mean, one way of solving this problem would just be to bypass the heater in summer, but I thought no, let's try and make this work. So got my template, sized it up in here. There are 3 let's just call them vents that are the same size in here. So there's one here, there's one just there, and then there's another one just over here as well, and then there's a 4th one which is around here, and this is the big fresh air vent. You can see here where I was trying to size up some foam. Almost impossible to try and cut it down to size and still keep a nice shape along here. So we'll give up on the white foam. We'll use the neoprene. It's self-adhesive as well, so it's got the sticky back on it, which makes things a lot easier rather than trying to spray adhesive foam on and then try and get it lined up before it dries and things like that. I am now going to take this, cut out 3, and then we'll work out. I might just gently tape them in position because they don't sit butted up to the edge here. If you do that, again, you'll have a problem with the flap door staying ajar just a tiny little bit. So it's almost got to be centered in here, but it's slightly offset. And this is why I've spent hours and hours trying to sort out with this white foam here. So the other thing I've done is I've been playing around with the 3D printed drains that go up the top here, but I'll get into that later. So that was a bit of a godsend, and I cut the end off so then I can go in through here. I'll sort that out at a later date. Got my first piece of insulation here to go on the door. Was kind of working out from behind so I can put part of my hand in there and in there and kind of hold it in. I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? Have a think. And then there's 2 holes. There's one there and there's one there. And I always wondered what they were for. And then I kind of went, well, maybe they're locating pins. So I've just stuck a nail in there, stuck a nail in there. It won't really matter. 2 small holes in the insulating foam. Hopefully that works. So I can take the adhesive backing off, stick it on, use my 2 nails that I've got here as locating pins, and hopefully that closes nice and tight. We'll see if the other door over here as well has them. I think it does. Yes, it does. So there's one there, one down the top, and there's one in here as well. There's another door, and I think it has locating holes as well. That's what I'm going to call them from now on, locating holes. Here we go. So I've done almost all of the flap doors. I've just got one more piece to put on. The last one of the 3 that were the same size, although interestingly the holes that I've used as my markers aren't all in the same location. Don't know. So this one is the main big fresh air vent flap door, and what I've done is I had to twist the piece of insulation around just so I could fit it all onto the one. And then as best as I could, I've made my template here, and then I have freehand or freestyle cut the curve which is along the top here, and then I've given myself a couple of extra millimeter here on the bottom just in case I need to trim a little bit off or make some slight adjustments up the top here. But I think as long as I can get this curvature okay, everything should line up. The main part will be, this one will be, it has a bit of a turned lip on the edge that the other ones don't. These are all flat. If I can tuck the foam underneath and then cut it down to size so it doesn't impede this hinge. Oh, it's almost like a piano hinge mechanism, but it's not. It actually pivots at the two ends. As long as I don't interrupt that, and as long as I don't have foam sticking out too far so it stops the trapdoor closing, everything will be okay. So I have just done the last piece of the puzzle with the flap doors. One of the doors, this is terrible photography, I'm sorry, it actually has foam on two sides, or it needs foam on two sides, that is, because it acts as a double-way trapdoor, for want of a better term. So what I did was, because this part is really hard to slide in and out, you need the doors in the exact position to get it on and off, or at least I found. And I knew that if I had foam on two sides, it was going to be really tricky. So what I did was I got everything back together, and you have to make sure that these parts go into their locating pins. And then on this door in here, I'll just hold the light up. So we've got foam on one side, and then when you move the lever across, now I've got foam on the other side. And what I did was, you can just see it in there in yellow, I closed this door, went round on this side as best I could in here with a marking pen, marked out the area. Just, there we go. And then I just used just a piece of tape to hold the foam in place, close the door, and then just pressed it firmly shut once I peeled the adhesive backing off. So the adhesive backing, once I peeled that off, and then just had it nice and tight up against the door. So one of the things I've noticed is you are never going to make this look absolutely perfect unless you take the whole thing apart, which unfortunately, like I said, I think I've said before, they don't make this seal. One day I will teach myself how to make seals. So unless you took all of this apart and slowly put it together piece by piece, you're always going to get little scratches inside and things like that, unfortunately. And to be honest, it wasn't perfect when I took it apart. You could see at the factory it was pretty rough the way they put it together. So I have got all the doors back together with foam. It's all located properly. So we've got this trapdoor as well. On here, like I said before, I've given it a slight tweak. I was going to put this protective oil cloth on the inside of this here, but I've come to realize it's a little bit too short on either side, so I'm just going to leave it for the moment. I did buy some dubbin to give it back a protective coat of wax, but yeah, I'll just hold off for the moment on that. Anyway, I've got this back together. I've got a friend printing some more 3D parts, so that, like, this is great, but I found that it doesn't quite go in there nicely. So we've got some more of these coming that we've tweaked slightly, and now I'm going to have a go at locating this heater core here, so that if I can move this trapdoor doesn't hit on this pipe here, so I might need to get in there and give that a bit of a tickle. But for the moment, it's looking pretty good. And the other thing I want to do is just locate this a bit better so it doesn't rattle around inside. So I'll use some insulating strips as well. I did think about, like I said, 3D printing a locating base for in here and up here, but by the time I worked out that I need to print something along here and around here, it started to get bigger than Ben-Hur. So if I ever do another one of these, like the spare one I've got sitting on the floor over there, I might have a bash, but for the moment, I think that just some more insulating foam will be okay, especially too once I've screwed it all together and it's a bit tighter. Heater core is in. I used some of the foam strip that came with it just to tuck it up against the locator tabs so it doesn't rattle around, and I've put some underneath here as well just to stop the pipes rubbing on the end of the heater box. Test fitted the door still closed, great. So now I have to grab the two, I'll just call them outside casing pieces that I have painted earlier, throw them back on, and then I will start looking at the linkage and give that a bit of a tidy up. It's a bit rough in a few places, and I will Loctite on this piece here that has got the stripped out. It's got just the remains of some threads in there. I'm just going to tiny bit of Loctite, just dab either side, cross my fingers and hope that works. If it does, great. Can move on to painting the engine bay. If it doesn't, I'll come back to this at a later time because it means I need to strip down the back part of the heater box and take that long seal off and then pull out the rod and all the rest of it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the Loctite works and the linkage is good to go, and then I can set this all aside and start tackling the engine bay. But it is also nudging 43 degrees in the garage today. It is time to go inside and sit in some aircon or get out of a garage with a tin roof, but that also reminds me that I will investigate how to bypass the heater core altogether and use something like factory heater bypass valves. So basically you are bypassing this altogether just by having a valve there and a valve there, and then you can just, or worst case, just pull the hoses off, put a piece of piping in between and just bypass the heater core in summer. That's worst case if after all of this with the foam and fixing the trapdoors and everything doesn't work. I am hoping that that is a last resort and that this all goes to plan. So I've got my two cover panels that I painted a while back. I've got this one here, covers the blower motor or the plastic fan that sits inside there, and I've screwed that all on, everything's good. The only thing I didn't do, trap for players for next time, was where I drilled out the pop rivets that held this panel on. Some of them I didn't go all the way through with the drill. It just snapped off the top of the rivet, so I had to come along with a small punch them through and then give the whole heater assembly a bit of a shake to get the remnants of the rivet out. So I've learnt that for next time. The other thing I've found is that with this plate or panel or part of the assembly, let's just call it, when you pop it in over the top, so you've got to put it over that pipe there and then snake it around this pipe here. When I do that, this replacement heater core that's sitting here is a different size to the original one. So from what I can gather, this is sitting slightly too far that way, which might be because there's foam down on the end. Anyway, no biggie. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bust out my Dremel. I've just made some lines here. I'm just going to recess or notch this the same as this part here, just to give this pipe a bit more clearance. So the idea of metal on metal just rubbing together, especially when you've got coolant going through it, not great in my sort of humble opinion. So I'll just notch that a little bit. And this one was fine. I had a couple of mil clearance all around it, so that'll be okay. Then the other thing I'm curious about, so I test fitted all of this with my pile of screws that I painted, and I think it will be okay, but all of these were pop riveted on, so pop rivets not sitting as proud as these little screws. I'm just curious if they will cause the heater box to sit up slightly. I don't think it'll be a problem, but I mean, it's a couple millimeters, it'll be fine. So while that paint's drying, I was just having a look inside the engine bay, planning my next path of attack, and I think what I'm going to do is take out this sound deadening mat that I've spoken about before, use the old pieces as a template, put in the new sound deadening mat, and clean up everything within sight while everything is out. You'll see in here, like, this is all just road grime that's just flicked up through here, and there's actually an opening under the steering box here that flicks, or I'm sure that this is where road grime is coming in and mixing with leaking oil and whatever, and it has stuck to every single surface. So I'll tidy all of this up, and especially in here, get in here, give all this a good clean as well, because this is basically all of this dust is what's going to blow on my face the first time I turn the fan on. So do that. Paint all the little parts as well, like these. So this black looks like it's the same color as this black, which to my eye looks like it's a gloss. Don't know why that is very matte here. I think that's probably been scratched and someone's touched that up. And what I'll do is paint everything in sections. So I'll focus on one part first, tidy that up, have that looking great or a lot better than what it is now, and then slowly tackle all the other bits of the engine bay sort of one part at a time. Some parts will definitely be needed to be sanded back to bare metal, especially where there's heavy, like down there. That will need to be all the way back because that paint has bubbled where it reacted with the degreaser. But it doesn't need to be totally bare metal, and to be honest, I don't have the time and I don't have the equipment. So if I had a paint booth and I had some more months up my sleeve and was doing this full time, absolutely I would. I'd take everything out of the engine bay and do it all in one hit, but for the moment I think I'm just going to tackle what I can in small manageable bites, and then I will be able to kind of tick one part off at a time, and hopefully doing it smaller will allow me to come maybe do an entire bit in a weekend, and then I can move on to the next bit. So things like here where the paint has been ripped off, I'm guessing by the brake fluid, I can take that off and just swing that out of the way, sand all that back, put back together, and have it sort of done within a few days. Whereas if I take everything out, I know what it's like. I've disassembled cars and put them back together in in the past and you think, oh yeah, this is only going to take a few months, and then a year later you're still going. So the other thing I've got to do too is find a lot of missing pieces. So all those rubber grommets are missing. So that's why my carpets were covered in road grime as well, just grease and things like that. So I've added them to the list, and I've also got to add some of these, which are the power steering hoses. For some reason, someone will know, or the theory I've heard is that if you shorten these, as in you run a short line from there to over there where the power steering pump would normally sit, it does something with the power steering system. It doesn't like having a short route. So I may keep it factory for the moment, but some of these lines will be original, so it's a good time to change those as well. So success. About 90% of the work on the heater box has been done. I am just going through and doing some last little things. Some things I've had to postpone. So these elbows that I had 3D printed by some friends, turns out I've asked them to print in the wrong material. It needs to be in a material called Ninja Flex, so that you can actually squeeze them into the hole in there, like the original rubber ones. So they're the original rubber ones there. That's okay, we'll sort that out. We can still put the heater box back into the car and then fit those at a later date. Just might be a little bit more tricky. I'm trying to find a replacement for this gasket here. I think it is rubber. It's nice and soft and pliable. Worst case, I'll just clean this up and reuse it in the meantime. But yes, I do need to find a piece of material that big and then cut it to size. That's okay, it's not a deal breaker. This piece I'm going to refit now. I'm just quickly filming while the house next door is taking a break from using power tools for their renovations. I've got my gasket here from Famous 4 for the engine bay, so I'm going to clean up the engine bay as well today in between meetings, hopefully get onto that. And the other part that I'm going to leave to last is sorting out the mechanism here and then Loctiting on this bit here where the thread was stripped out. So I thought I'd put this in the car, get everything in the right position with the levers, which are these things here, give this another bit of a touch-up paint, and then have it all set in the correct position, then put Loctite in, and hopefully that will work. Okay, the power tools have started, so signing off for now. Okay, ignore the noise in the background. Really quickly, before I forget, and to also point people in the right direction and say thank you, the classic Rover forum user DAK, I think it is, D-A-K, was the source of the elbows files. Thank you. Super handy. They put them up so that they are one directional, so you will need two of these. There is a left and a right hand side, so you will need to find someone to flip that for you. Thank you again. Alex's assets on YouTube. She shows you how to rebuild the fan motor if your fan motor isn't going at the different speeds very well. Check out her channel. She has a couple of things on P6s, but that fan motor video, even though I didn't need to use it, was still quite handy in understanding how the fan motor works and where it sits inside the heater box, etc. The other person that I used was Mr. Man in the UK. I forgot to mention that's where I got the heater core from. Really easy to deal with. It is slightly undersized. You are buying a heater core that is not for a P6, but like I showed, you can make it fit. You can do whatever, 3D print, use extra foam, put in some spacer blocks, etc. I'm sure it will be great. And more importantly than anything else, the two hoses, or the hose outlets, the two hoses come out in pretty much exactly the right spot. It's not perfect. but it's as near as close as can be. So, and you only just need to slightly, I just dremeled a little bit around here just to make this fit better. Was it this side? It was this side, I think, that I had to clearance out a little bit. More than anything else, I'd say it's probably the difference in tolerances on this heater box. And here we are, one nearly completed Rover P6 or P6B heater box. I'll just move around so that you can get a better view. So you can see here, I still haven't found another seal or material to make another seal. That's fine. I've actually put this in just to test fit, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I thought at the end of all the videos that I've sort of put together as a compilation, I would go through some of the things that I encountered as a bit of a how-to guide for anyone out there that's going to take out their heater box or try and fix any coolant leaks they have, or even the mechanism on the side here, which can sometimes fail. And I'm just going by some notes I've made. So here we go. So the first piece of advice I can give you, or the first tip, is take a lot of photos, and if you can, label them as well. So I took a lot of photos and some videos sort of after I had taken things apart, and it tripped me up. Luckily, there are pictures out there on the Rover forum, and there's some really good photos floating around on Flickr. Sorry, I forget your username, whoever posted them. There's the odd photo on some Rover Facebook groups as well that are really handy. But what I've learnt is take a lot of photos, and the reason I'm standing here is particularly of this side with the linkage mechanism. Take a lot of photos, either put a post-it note with a description inside the photo as well. So you take a photo of what you want to capture, have a post-it note there, or if you use some kind of filing system in the cloud, label your photo file names with a note to yourself, so you can look back and say, oh, that's the driver's side linkage, etc. If you need to as well, write down some notes. I've got a bit of a notebook here that I drew some pictures in of diagrams of how the linkage worked and what bolts went where, etc. And the other suggestion I have for you is to take photos of you taking the box out, and if you can, actually have someone come and give you a hand and actually video it being removed, because it is quite tricky. The other suggestion I have for you is inside the cabin. You can see that mine's a Australian air-conditioned car, so I believe that this is a bit different. And mine, sorry about the poor video, my choke has been moved up to here. So trying to remember how things went together under the dash here, it's a bit of a puzzle. So I wish I had have taken more photos and labeled things in hindsight. It's a bit of a wiring slash levers and nuts and bolts jigsaw puzzle under here. If I remember rightly, the reason I didn't take more photos and make notes was I didn't think it would take this long to put this all back together. So it's been over a year, which is my fault. I've been a bit slow. And yes, with the advantage of being able to look back, I definitely wish I had have taken more photos. The other suggestion I have for you is I tried to take a shortcut by not taking the whole unit apart. So what I did was I actually took this end and I would slide the whole mechanism out. Not this bit with the rods and the linkages, but if you remember the flap doors, the ones I had all the trouble with the foam. In hindsight, it's so much easier to look back and go, oh, why didn't I do that at the time? if I can suggest something to you, it is to take all of the screws out, all of the pop rivets out, and have all of these pressed metal components. Just lay them all out, sand it all back, and put down your favorite anti-rust protective coating, and then paint it to whatever color you want. I really wish I had have done that now, because like I said, trying to take the shortcut way actually proved to be the long way of doing it, because I kept having to go back and redo things that weren't quite right, or I couldn't get paint in particular difficult to get to corners, things like that. You can see here in my engine bay, I've got things labelled with green masking tape. I wish I had labelled more things inside the cabin, like I showed earlier. You can see here I've actually written myself a note, one bolt in. So I've got a bolt here, just keeping the unit in place. When you take things apart, either use a magnet tray, or use plastic containers, or whatever is your favorite way of storing nuts and bolts and things like that. But just make sure that you label where things come from. And then what I've taken to doing over the years is, like I said before, if I take some bolts out of a particular area, I'll have like a photo of the bolts in my hand, and I'll be pointing to where they came from, or I'll put some masking tape on saying A, and then I'll have bolts labeled as A in a plastic bag, that kind of thing. With the heater box, I mentioned earlier in one of the videos about how there was different screw sizes and things like that, and those posi drive screws. It's pretty easy with the ones up the top. They're a larger size screw than the ones that the box is held together with, but when you get down to things like taking apart the rods and things like that, you definitely want to label these. Otherwise you'll be spending a while trying to figure out which bit went where. So label everything and add that to your documentation about how the whole unit came apart. It'll just make things so much easier for you when you go to put it back together. My next suggestion is to jump online and have a bit of a read on forums and Facebook posts. Some people say that you need to take the bonnet off, that you need to take the windscreen wiper scuttle panel off. I think that's the correct name for that piece of metal that runs along here. Some people talk about taking the wiper motor out. I think there might be a bit of confusion between Series 1 and Series 2 cars. I'm not sure of the exact differences between the two. I looked at a friend's Series 1 car the other day that didn't have power steering, and to my untrained eye, it looked quite different. I think too, having the engine in the engine bay would make things a lot harder. But speaking from a Series 2 car perspective, I found it really tricky to actually get this heater box back in. I can't remember what it was like to get it out. I do remember that the levers inside the car, I had to get under the dashboard and be upside down and use tiny little ratchet wrenches here to, ring spanners, an open-ended spanner, to get the nuts off for the levers, I think they're called. The other thing that I can sort of point out to you, and again, I'm not sure if this is a Series 1 or a Series 2 thing, was when I was trying to put the heater box in, I found, so I was actually standing in the engine bay. Oh, one other thing, I've read that it's actually easier if you have two people, so one person on each side of the engine bay, if you have the engine in the car. Luckily, I'm quite tall, so I can up and over the front radiator support panel and stand in the engine bay. But going back to putting this back in, you can't just drop it down from the top. It doesn't work like that. I'll take this out in a moment because it's only been test fitted for the the moment, but when you come to refit it, you have to slide it in on an angle, and you need to hook in the, I'm going to call this the fresh air trap door, fresh air flap door lever, because it is quite tricky to slide it into where it needs to go through the firewall. And it did take me a couple of goes, and I got it close a few times, but it wouldn't quite sit down. And in the end, what I did was, and again, not an expert, don't know if it helped, but this is what I did, was I made sure that the steering was turned hard right, so that that castellated nut and steering joint were out of the way. And I also loosened off this bracket here. Actually, I think I took it off completely, and I've just put it back on so I don't forget where it goes. And then that gave me a little bit extra wiggle room, and then I pushed down really hard on the power steering hoses, obviously without breaking where they join onto the power steering fluid reserve tank, and then managed to push down and slide it in that way. The only downside of that was that I have scratched all of the nice paint and undercoat on the side of the box, but that's okay. They're things we can fix. If I come around here as well, it is I'm not sure if it can actually, it is a really tight fit in there. So don't get frustrated, take your time, go for a walk around the house or garden, or walk around the block, or go and do something to blow off a bit of pressure. If it doesn't go in the first couple of times, it is definitely a British car thing of, it will not fit the first time, but it may fit on the 7th time. Oh, and as an example of why you should label things, there are 3 holes here. I've looked online and found a really good photo which shows that there are 3, they look like plastic caps that would push through, I think. I have no idea where mine have gone or what that is used for, because I didn't document things when I took it apart. So that's a really good example there of why you should label things as you take them apart, and then you have that reference material for when you go to put it back together. Yes, I am standing in the engine bay with now dirty white shoes, and I just want to show that this is the angle that you need to remove the heater box from. So you pull it out, you've got your 3 wires here that need to be disconnected from the main loom over here. You can see here I've labelled them. So I've got ABC, ABC, and I'm going to partially take this out now to show you how the lever for this flap door here needs to come out, so that when you go to take it out, you can actually get it out the first time, and then when we go to put it back in, we can see how it needs to slot into the hole in the firewall. Okay, so I've got it partially out. We've scratched all the side, we've scratched all the side in here. That's okay, they can all be fixed. I was going to myself, this is a bit harder to get out than I remember last night when I was having a go. And then I just stopped, paused for a moment, and I realised what had happened. There's a trap door on the bottom of this, and that was caught open down in there. You can't see it, but that is the duct for the air to go to the footwells, I believe, from memory. And so instead of being like that, the flap door was down, so every time I went to move, it was hitting the side of the opening. So once I reached in and just manually moved the lever so that the door closed, it started to come out. So that's another tip for you as well. Okay, so this was the last piece of the puzzle that I was trying to capture. This rod here is the one that controls this flap door here. And then as you can see here, it's actually, I didn't end up Loctiting it because I wanted to Loctite it onto the rod when I had it into position so that I didn't accidentally Loctite it in the wrong position relative to the rod arm and then the lever inside the cabin. And you can actually see here in me trying to get it out, it has come off the rod. So I've just poked. Basically I need to get this out and then poke it back through. I can already see that putting this back in is going to be a bit of a mission. That's okay. It's this bit that is really tricky. So if I could just get this in here, trying to get the heater box in while feeding this into this small hole here in the firewall is really hard. I think what happens is that this part here gets caught in some of the wiring under the dash, and also on my car at least, there is some vinyl hanging down from some of the trim for the dashboard, etc. And I think it is just hanging down enough that at times, if you don't get this in the right spot, it sort of pokes into that gap where maybe the glue on the back of the vinyl from the factory has dried out, and so the vinyl has, has dropped down enough that this is getting stuck in there. So when you're putting this all back together, just gradually get this lined up, and you need to, like I said, you need to kind of feed it in and snake it through into position. Push down, if you've got power steering, push down on your power steering hoses, and then just kind of swing the box in to position, and then that rod will end up under your dashboard to the left of the steering wheel in a right-hand drive car. Hopefully that all makes sense. What I can suggest too, along with taking lots of photos, is take a really nice clear photo of this in relation to where the levers are in the car. So before you start pulling things apart, photo this bit, photos inside your cabin of where, you know, when this lever is down, where does this sit? When this lever is up, where does this sit, etc. Especially this one here. Hopefully this is the last of the heater box series of videos, and we can move on to more exciting things. Take care. See you next time.